Hey everyone, let's get cracking on topic 6 part 2. Now, topic 6 part 2 is kind of lengthy. That's why I split it up into two sections, A and B. So just so you're aware of that. Okay, we're going to learn about how muscles contract. It's a very important process that you as nurses or you as health professionals need to understand, because you're going to be encountering people with disorders associated with that. Okay, again, learning objectives. All right, so the first thing that we need to kind of get our heads around is that neurons actually tell muscle cells to contract. Okay, now how does it all start? Well, what we're going to look at is skeletal muscle. Remember that in the previous video we learned that there are actually 3 kinds of muscle, but we are focusing on the contraction of only one kind, and that is skeletal muscle. Okay, so skeletal muscle is under voluntary control, which means that you decide when you want those muscles to contract. Okay, and that happens, your decision making happens in the primary motor cortex in the brain. Okay, so so let's have a look at that. Sorry about that pop-up. I thought that I stopped all of those notifications. Okay, so let's have a look and see how this process kind of works. So here is an area of your brain which it's called the primary motor cortex. So you kind of make a decision around the frontal lobe here, and then it ends up activating or sending action potentials to these neurons. Now in here is where the motor information comes from. So motor neurons actually start, or the cell bodies actually start all the way up here, and there's usually a bit of a chain. So you do have a long motor neuron here, which the cell body kind of sits there, and it's very, very long. And then sometimes you have an interneuron, and then you have a lower motor neuron that works from the spinal cord to the actual muscle. But, you do have a chain of neurons. So if we have a look at, let me just go back a step for a second. Yeah. So we have an upper motor neuron, an interneuron, and a lower motor neuron. I guess for your purposes, all I want to do is just make sure that you understand, that motor neurons are neurons that tell your skeletal muscles to contract. Okay, so we're going to do this in kind of like a story format, because things happen step by step. So you make a decision to, say, pick up your phone or pick up a pen or whatever. So when that decision is made, this action potential, okay, which we've seen in BMS 165, is actually going to travel all the way down to your muscle, okay? So an action potential travels all the way down to your muscle, and that tells your muscle to contract. And we're going to actually look and see how that actually happens. But for you guys at this stage of your learning, I just want you to understand that a signal starts in your brain and travels all the way down here. And when it gets to your muscle, it tells your muscle to contract. All right, so what we're going to do is spend a little bit of time looking at muscle cells. So here is just the spinal cord and we're just looking at the lower motor neurons here. So if we go back a slide, oops, let's go back a slide for a second. We're just looking at this for now, this part here. So can you see there we have 3 motor neurons, and they're all kind of ending up at different kind of oval shapes. So this motor neuron, the orange one, can you see how it's connecting to 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes? And can you see here the blue one, the blue motor neuron, is connecting to 1, 2, 3 of those shapes? Now those shapes are actually muscle cells. Now I'm going to show you, see? Look at that. So you can actually interact with the little 3D drawing. So those shapes there are this, is what I'm trying to get you to understand. So this is just this cut this way. So I've got 1, 2, 3 muscle cells, and that one is that one is that, and that one is that. So I just want you to think that about 2 things. Number 1 is that the motor neuron can connect to more than 1 muscle cell. That's the first thing. And the second thing I want you to make sure you understand is that muscle cells are shaped like cylinders. Okay? So maybe as an activity, you can manipulate this little 3D drawing to make it look like it's in the same plane as this one. I reckon that would help your learning. Okay, let me move myself out of the way, hey? All right, so we saw that 1 neuron can connect with many muscle cells, and the bit where they connect, see this bit here? That bit is called the neuromuscular junction. So as the activity, circle all of the neuromuscular junctions that you can see. So a junction, you know what a junction is, where you meet, two different places or 2 different roads meet. So here, what we're meeting together is the neuron, the end of the neuron with the plasma membrane of the muscle cell. And don't forget that the muscle cell is a cylinder shape. So neuromuscular junction, it tells you what's at the junction just by its name. Neuro, neuron, muscular, muscle cell. Okay, let me move myself out of the way again. All right, so this is where we are in the story. Here is our motor neuron. This is the end of the motor neuron. And this is our muscle cell. So we are, let me just go back a step. So this bit here is actually this bit. Okay, so just so you know where you are. So let's have a look at a picture of a neuromuscular junction. Now we're going to go and we're going to have a look at all of these in turn. Let me just move myself out of the way for a second. Here we go. The neuromuscular junction can be a very busy place, just like any junction is. Okay. Now what I want you to do is spot some things that you can actually recognize in this picture. I'm sure that you could recognize a few bits and pieces. For example, what does that look like? Hint, hint, it's the powerhouse of the cell. All right, what do these look like? So have a look and see if you can spot anything else that kind of looks familiar. All right, it's okay if you can't, but just spend a little bit of time just looking at all the bits and pieces in this very, very busy kind of area. All right, so now we're going to continue with our story. We're going to learn about what happens when an action potential reaches the end of the axon. Okay, so this story involves many steps, but we are going to be learning all the steps, and you need to be able to explain all of these steps in your own words. All right. So when the action potential reaches the end of the axon over here, it causes calcium channels to open. Now, where are they? These are the little green ones here. See them? Let me just go back a step for a second because I want to show you. So these calcium channels there, they are sitting here. All right, just so you know where you are. So the action potential reaches down here and it opens up these channels. Now these little channels here, they are specifically designed to allow calcium ions through. So when they are open, calcium, which are like the little green balls here in this picture, move from outside of the neuron to inside of the neuron. Okay, so add arrows to this image and circle all of the different calcium channels, so you kind of do that and it will help you remember later on. Right, so calcium is a very important ion because what it does, when it actually goes into the neuron, it helps push these little bubbles out. Now these little bubbles are made out of plasma membrane, and they're like little, little packages, little packets. Now these little packets, calcium pushes them towards this plasma membrane. So when these little packets get close to the plasma membrane, they kind of merge with it, and then that allows the little, what's in the little packages to come out. Okay, so you can see that these little packages are called vesicles, and they're actually, the red dots are called neurotransmitters. All right, so the red dots are neurotransmitters. Right, so let's have a look. You can see that the neurotransmitters in a motor neuron, in this picture they are red. Now these guys are actually called acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is the name of the neurotransmitter that is always in the neuromuscular junction. That motor neurons always use that particular neurotransmitter. They don't use anything else. So for skeletal muscle contraction, these red dots are always acetylcholine. Now, let's have a look and see what happens when acetylcholine ends up in the gap between the motor neuron and the muscle cell. Okay? Can you see here that there are little pink kind of structures? Those little pink kind of structures, they are actually receptors or channels designed to bind to acetylcholine. So these little pink guys are acetylcholine receptors. So have a look in this picture and see if you can circle a few of those. As you can see in the picture, acetylcholine is already stuck to some of them. All right? All right, let's just do this step and then I might let you catch up with your notes. So when acetylcholine sticks to these receptors, it opens the channel. So these pink things here, they are channels. So they are proteins and they are channels. And when acetylcholine sticks onto them, the channel opens and allows things to go through. So if there's no acetylcholine, it's shut. When acetylcholine is present, the channel opens like a tube. All right? So acetylcholine binds to its receptors, and when they do, they are open. Can you see that you need two keys to open that tube? Yeah. And look at these guys. Oh, they are phospholipids. So what is this called? A phospholipid bilayer. So that is the plasma membrane of the muscle cell. Look how adorable they are with their little kinky tails. Cute. All right. So when acetylcholine binds to the receptors, it opens up the channel, and the pink channels are designed to only let sodium through. So let's go back a step. Sodium moves from the outside of the muscle cell to the inside. And so here's a little picture that shows you that. Here is the neuromuscular junction. This is the motor neuron. This just means stripy. And this is the muscle cell. You know, we know that muscle cells are like cylinders. So when sodium enters the muscle cell, it kind of spreads. Okay, it causes a muscle action potential, and that spreads all along the muscle cell. Okay? So don't forget that neurons and muscle cells are the only cells in the body that can do an action potential. So when sodium opens, when sodium enters the muscle cell, an action potential will kick off and it'll go all the way along the muscle cell. Just like you lighting a twig on fire. This match is the coming in of the sodium ions into the muscle cell, and it just spreads like fire. All right, I might let you catch up with your notes and then I will continue.